Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Kalen DeBoer, Alabama. We said it with the Xavier Griffin commitment. I'll say it again. Not enough people are talking about what Alabama is doing on the recruiting trail. Another monster win on a Wednesday afternoon. Five-star wide receiver Cederian Morgan committing to Alabama. Look, here's what stands out to me about this kid. Really one of the more unique wide receivers I've seen come out of high school. 6'4", 210, basketball and track and field background. You kind of just blindly assume this is going to be a big body wide receiver that wants to work vertically down the field. Now, although he can very much do that and provide that skill set to this Alabama offense, this is a kid that is about as well-rounded as it gets. And you turn on the film and say, hey, he does a lot of his damage out of the slot. He's an extremely smooth mover for his size. Look, you love the size, speed profile for Cederian Morgan. What makes this kid special, at least in my opinion, what makes this kid a bona fide five-star, his ability to separate, his ability to be dynamic in terms of yards after the catch. You don't find many wide receivers who are 6'4", 210 that can separate and that can create with the football like a guy in Cederian Morgan. The other thing I love about him, you can move him all around this offense and ask him to do so many different things. Like when we talk about most of these 6'4", 200-plus pound wide receivers, they're kind of just one-trick ponies. Hey, I'm a big body that can run real fast in a straight line and work vertically. It ain't the case with Cederian Morgan, especially with how talented this Alabama wide receiver room is going to be, not only in the 2025 year, obviously, but the next couple of years. You want wide receivers that can do different things, that can be in different spots. You can put them in different spots. That's Cederian Morgan. And once again, Alabama recruiting the heck out of the state, which was something that everybody wanted to talk about 12 months ago. Ain't nobody talking about it right now. Really excited to get into this kid. Before we do, and as always, to the Alabama fans, appreciate you guys. And, we kind of said it with the Xavier Griffin commitment. It's about to get real for Alabama, and you take a look at what this 2026 cycle could look like if some things fall the right way for Alabama. You're looking at potentially 5, maybe even 6 five-star commitments in the 2026 cycle. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into Cederian Morgan. Now, we're not going to get into the film because you kind of know what you're going to see. You're going to see a 5-star wide receiver. I want to talk more about what's unique about this kid, and that is, number one, when you talk about a 6'4", 210 wide receiver, you kind of assume they're going to be really good at the catch point. That's very accurate for Cederian Morgan, and it's not only because he's really tall, but it's the coordination. It's the body control. This is a guy that, 6'4", 210, going to be bigger than just about every defensive back that's trying to cover him. But you talk about the body control and coordination when that football is in the air, it's very clear that this kid has a basketball background because he's very comfortable going up and making plays. Now, he can also be very much a weapon in the red zone. This is something, again, you just want to throw him a contested catch opportunity, probably going to come down with it. But a guy that's really crafty, has some nice tempo on his routes. I feel like I break down so many wide receivers that they're really good players and are going to be good in college, but they're always seem to be so one-dimensional. Cederian Morgan is so much more than just a one-dimensional big body that works vertically down the field. That's what stands out to me. Now, you look at this Alabama class in 2025, 48 hours ago, maybe 72 hours ago, Alabama wasn't even in the top 10. The commitment of Xavier Griffin, and now a guy like Cederian Morgan, you got 3, maybe 4 or 5 stars, depending on Xavier Crow and how he finishes in the rankings. Look, Cederian Morgan, Jordan Edmonds, and Xavier Griffin, they going to be 5 stars come December. And I think what's really exciting if you're an Alabama fan, Jair Edwards committing July 5th. He probably committed to Alabama too, so that's a 4th 5-star. You look at Anthony Tank Jones, in-state kid in the state of Alabama. Alabama has dominated the state. Probably looking good for Tank Jones as well. Alabama, we're talking about 5 or 6, bona fide top 32 nationally ranked prospects coming into this program in 2025. 2026, excuse me. We had a lot of question marks in terms of, hey, Can Kalen DeBoer come in and recruit against coaches like Kirby Smart or against a coach like Hugh Freeze? Kalen DeBoer's coming and done just that. Now, you look at the bigger picture for Alabama. I've been very vocal. I really do like what they're doing at the quarterback position. I think they knew they weren't going to be able to get a super big name in 2026. That's just the fact of the matter when you have a guy like Keelan Russell coming into the program. Let's go bet on some upside. And they're going to bet on two, it sounds like, of some real upside quarterbacks that probably ain't going to see the field much over the first couple of years. But when Keelan Russell moves on to the NFL draft, there's a very good chance that one of these two quarterbacks can take over this Alabama offense and kind of hit the ground running, especially when you have Ryan Grubb and Kalen DeBoer kind of developing these quarterbacks, especially with the pieces that you're putting around the quarterback in terms of the run game and at the wide receiver position. The offensive line class, I'm a massive fan of Sam Mutu. Quite frankly, I'm a fan of Chris Booker too, but Sam Mutu's my guy from the state of California. It's going to be a smaller class. I think that's okay because you go back to the 2025 cycle when you bring in 4 blue chippers, headlined by a guy like Jackson Lloyd and Mike Carroll. You probably weren't going to sign a massive offensive line class in 2026. The one position that I really want to see Alabama close on is the line of scrimmage. If there is one concern for Alabama fans in terms of, hey, can Kalen DeBoer just pick up where Nick Saban left off? And look, we know it ain't going to look like Nick Saban, right? Nick Saban had his way of coaching. Kalen DeBoer has his way. You do think that if Alabama can have the same amount of success that they had under Nick Saban, you probably feel like the defensive line needs to be kind of the tip of the spear for this defense. I love what they're doing in the secondary, and they're going to have an elite secondary for a very long time. When I look at the Alabama teams that were national championships or national championship caliber and won national championships, and quite frankly, you look at every team that's won a national championship over the last half decade, Georgia's, you look at Michigan, Ohio State, they all had dominant NFL caliber defensive lines. You want to see Alabama develop that, and that starts at the high school trail. You can't find the game records on the defensive line in the portal. You can fill in the cracks, and you can add to your depth of your defensive line, but you ain't going to find a guy like Will Anderson in the transfer portal. If you want those dominant difference makers that can lead you to national championships, that can put a fingerprint all over the football game, you got to get them at the high school ranks. It's nowhere near a bad defensive line class, and they are stacking some quality bodies. You're looking for those difference makers, whether that's a Nolan Wilson. I think it'd probably be Anthony Jones. I'm a big fan of KJ Ford from Duncanville too. Obviously the connection to Keelan Russell. That's what I'm looking for. I'm going to get fired up anytime you land a player like Cederian Morgan. I think if Kalen DeBoer can have the success that Nick Saban had, I think you got to see some better bodies come in on the defensive line. If Alabama can do that, look, we going to be rolling. I feel pretty dang confident saying that. And I think the thing that fires me up the most is Kalen DeBoer showing that he can recruit at a level high enough to win national championships. That was the number one concern. Like when Kalen DeBoer took this job in Tuscaloosa, look, I ain't got no question marks about the football coach that Kalen DeBoer is. One of the best in the country. He's got the track record of 2 decades of winning to back that up. Hey, can you acquire the talent necessary? Because we know that's how it works. Like it starts with just getting the Jimmies and Joes that can go win you national championships. That was the question. We getting that answered from Kalen DeBoer. We want to see them close on some of these targets on the defensive line. If they can do that, we're feeling good about what Alabama is going to look like in 2026. I'd even argue, look, there's a legitimate pathway for Alabama signing the best class in the country. Now, they need some things to go right. There is certainly that avenue you can see playing out. We'll sign out there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.